Jawaharlal Nehru, the variety and unity of India. The diversity of India is tremendous. It is obvious it lies on the surface and anybody can see it. It concerns itself with physical appearances as well as with certain mental habits and traits. There is little in common to outward seeming between the Pathan of the northwest and the Tamil in the far south. Their racial stocks are not the same, though there may be countless stands running from them that differ in face and figure, food and clothing, and of course, language. In the northwestern frontier province, there is already the breeze of Central Asia, and many a custom there, as in Kashmir, remains one of the countries on the other side of the Himalayas. Pattern popular dances are singularly like Russian Cossack dancing, yet with all these differences there is no mistaking the impress of India on the Bhutan. As this is obvious on the Tamil, this is not surprising for these borderlands. And indeed, Afghanistan also were united with India for thousands of years. The old Turkish and other races who inhabited Afghanistan and parts of Central Asia before the advent of Islam were largely Buddhists, and earlier still there the period of the epics Hindus. The frontier area was one of the principal centers of old Indian culture, and it abounds still with ruins of monuments and monasteries, and especially of the great University of Taxila, which was at the height of its fame 2000 years ago, attracting students from all over India as well as different parts of Asia. Changes of religion made a difference but could not change entirely the mental background which the people of those areas had developed. The Pathan and the Tamil are two extreme examples, the other lies somewhere in between. All of them have their distinctive features, all of them have still more the distinguishing mark of India. It is fascinating to find how the Bengalis, the Marathas, the Gujaratis, the Tamils and Andhras, the Oriyas, the Assamese, the Canaries and Malayalis, the Sindhis, the Punjabis, the Pathans, and the Kashmiris, the Rajputs are the great central block comprising the Hindustani speaking people have retained their peculiar characteristics for hundreds of years, have still more or less the same virtues and failings of which old tradition or record tell us, and yet have been throughout these ages distinctively Indian, with the same national heritage and the same set of moral and mental qualities. There was something living and dynamic about the heritage which showed itself in ways of living and a philosophical attitude to life and its problems. Ancient India, like ancient China, was a world in itself, a culture and a civilization which gave shape to all things. Foreign influences far in and often influenced the culture and were observed. Disruptive tendencies gave rise immediately to an attempt to find a synthesis, some kind of a dream of unity has occupied the mind of India since the dawn of civilization. That unity was not conceived as something imposed from outside, a standardization of externals or even of beliefs. It was something deeper, and within its fold, the widest tolerance of belief and custom was practiced, and every variety acknowledged and encouraged. Differences, big or small, can always be noticed even within a national group. However, closely bound together, it may be the essential unity of that group becomes apparent when it is compared to another national group, though often the difference between two adjoining groups fade out or intermingle near the frontiers, and modern developments are tending to produce a certain uniformity everywhere. In ancient and medieval times, the idea of the modern nations was not existent, and feudal, religious, racial, or cultural bonds had more importance. Yet, I think that at almost any time in recorded history, an Indian would have felt more or less at home in any part of India and would have felt as a stranger and alien in any other country. He would certainly have felt less of a stranger in countries which had partly adopted his culture or religion. Those who professed a religion of non Indian origin are coming to India, settled down there, became distinctively Indian in the course of a few generations, such as Christian, Jewish, Parsis, Muslims, Indian converts to some of these religions never ceased to be India's on account of a change of their faith. They were looked upon in other countries as Indians and foreigners, even though there might have been a community of faith between them. Today, when the conception of nationalism has developed much more, Indians in foreign countries inevitably form a national group and hang together for various purposes. In spite of their internal differences, an Indian Christian is looked upon as an Indian wherever he may go. An Indian Muslim is considered an Indian in Turkey or Arabia or Iran or any other country where Islam is the dominant religion. All of us, I suppose, have varying pictures of our native land, and no two persons will think exactly alike. When I think of India, I think of many things. Of broad fields dotted with innumerable small villages, of towns and cities I have visited, of the magic of the rainy season which pours life into the dry parsed up land and converts it suddenly into a glistening expanse of beauty and greenery, of great rivers and flowing water, of the Khyber Pass in all its bleak surroundings, of the southern tip of India, of people individually and in the mass, and above all, of the Himalayas, snow capped, or some mountainous valley in Kashmir in the spring, covered with new flowers and with a brook bubbling and gurgling through it. We make and preserve the pictures of our choice, and so I have chosen this mountain background rather than the more normal pictures of a hot subtropical country. Both pictures would be correct, for India stretches from the tropics right up to the temperate regions, from near the equator to the cold heart of Asia. Traveling through India. Towards the end of 1936 and in the early month of 1937, my touring progressively gathered speed and became frantic. I passed through this vast country like some hurricane, travel, traveling night and day, always on the move, hardly staying anywhere, hardly resting. There were urgent demands from me from all parts, and time was limited, for the general election were approaching and I was supposed to be an election winner for others. I traveled mostly by automobile, partly by aeroplane and railway. Occasionally I had to use for short distances an elephant, a camel, or a horse, or travel by steamer, paddleboat, or canoe, or use a bicycle, or go on foot. This odd and varied method of transport sometimes became necessary in the interior, far from the beaten track. I carried a double set of microphones and loudspeakers with me for it was not possible to deal with the vast gathering in any other way, nor indeed could I otherwise retain my voice. Those microphones went with me to all manner of strange places, from the frontliners, from the frontiers of Tibet to the border of Balochistan, where no such things had ever been seen or heard or previously. From early morning till late at night, I travelled from place to place where great gatherings awaited me, and in between this there were numerous stops where peasant villagers stood to greet me. These were impromptu affairs which upset my heavy program and delayed all subsequent engagements, and yet how was it possible for me to rush by unheeding and careless of these humble folk? Delay was added to delay, and at the big open air gatherings it took many minutes for me to pass through the crowds to the platform and later to come away. Every minute counted, and the minutes piled up on top of each other and became hours, so that by the time evening came, I was several hours late, but the crowd was waiting patiently, though it was winter and they sat and shivered in the open, insufficiently clad as they were. My day's program would thus prolong itself to 18 hours, and we would reach our journey's end for the day at midnight or after. Once in the Karnataka, in mid February, we passed all bounds and broke our own records. The day's program was a terribly heavy one, and we had to pass through a very beautiful mountain forest with winding and none too good roads which could only be tackled slowly. There were half a dozen monster meetings and many smaller ones. We began the day by a function at 8 in the morning, and our last engagement was at 4 a.m. It should have been 7 hours earlier, and then we had to cover another 70 miles before we reached our resting place for the night. We arrived at 7 a.m., having covered 415 miles that day and night, apart from numerous meetings. It had been a 23-hour day, and an hour later I had to begin my next day's program. Someone took the trouble to estimate that during these months some 10 million persons actually attended the meetings I addressed, while some additional millions were brought into some kind of touch with me during my journeys by road. The biggest gatherings would consist of about 100,000 persons, while audiences of 20,000 were fairly common. Occasionally, in passing through a small town, I would be surprised to notice that it was almost deserted and the shops were closed. The explanation came to me when I saw that almost the entire population of the town, men, women, and even children, had gathered at the meeting place on the other side of the town, and we were waiting patiently for my arrival. How I managed to carry on in this way without physical collapse, I cannot understand now, for it was a prodigious feat of physical endurance. Gradually, I suppose my system adapted itself to the vagrant life. I would sleep heavily in the automobile for half an hour between two meetings and find it hard to wake up. Yet I had to get up, and the sight of a great cheering crowd would finally wake me. I reduced my meal to a minimum and often dropped a meal, especially in the evenings, feeling the better for it. But what kept me up and filled me with vitality was the vast enthusiasm and affection that surrounded me and met me everywhere I went. I was used to it, and yet I could never get quite used to it, and every new day brought its surprises.